we sometimes keep too much of the artist hat on when we're doing the marketing.
Yeah.
And we don't allow the marketer to be as free as they would be otherwise. So no, I think that definitely is worth considering. And as you're saying, like, I'm being introspective about myself, even like, am I hampering myself this way?
Hello, fellow creative voyagers. This week on the Indie Author Podcast, I talk with Malorie Cooper about the perks and pitfalls of Facebook ads, including the significance of high contrast images and textual elements in ad creatives, the benefits and drawbacks of Facebook's automated targeting suggestions, and the latest updates in Facebook's targeting mechanisms that can affect ad performance. Mal emphasizes the need for authors to diversify their advertising efforts, touching on the importance of also experimenting with platforms like Amazon Ads and BookBub for broader marketing success. Now, let's hear from Malorie Cooper about the perks and pitfalls of Facebook ads. Hello, and welcome to the Indie Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Malorie Cooper. Hey, Mal, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. To give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you, Malorie Cooper has been teaching authors how to run Facebook ads for over 7 years, and nothing makes her day more than knowing that what she does helps authors elevate their careers. And so we're going to be talking about Facebook as an ad platform for authors. And this is a topic that I'm always interested in because I'll describe my situation, and Mal, you can tell me if this is common for other authors. I was doing pretty well with Facebook ads in 2020, 2021. And right around that time, my results tanked. Nothing I did, none of the classes I took, none of the advice I was following was helping. And I was hearing that from other authors too. Was there something that happened around that time that caused that? Or was it just a coincidental thing that I and some other authors I knew were kind of struggling at the same time a couple of years ago?
It seems like every now and then, like Facebook is always making changes to their ad platform. Sometimes they're minor, sometimes they're substantial. There's probably like 2 or 3 substantial changes that happen a year. And it's true that for some authors, they have zero impact. And for other authors, they might actually have a very notable impact. And it usually has to do with like your genre and perhaps the way you were targeting your genre or particular techniques that you were using to reach your readers that Facebook deprioritized or took ads that had a particular wording in them or type of image in them or something like that and decided to show them less. Or maybe Facebook got in its head that particular text and image combo should be shown to a certain type of person that actually isn't your reader. So there's a whole host of things that can happen. And even things like the interests that you're targeting just go away in some cases. So, and if those were working really well for you when they're not there anymore, then it might be hard to find readers that convert. So yeah, it does kind of happen in waves. That might have coincided with the big iOS security changes that caused Facebook to revamp a bunch of things. It also could have been connected, if memory, I don't always remember the exact time frames for these things, but the COPPA laws, the child sex trafficking laws, had a vast and far-reaching impact in how companies manage data online to be compliant with all of those laws. And that actually had an impact on certain types of ads, certain wordings that you would never expect to be even tangentially related. So yeah, there's a slew of reasons why that could happen. But at the same time, there have definitely been authors who continue to thrive and do well with ads at that time and still do. So a lot of working with Facebook ads is figuring out how to analyze and diagnose problems with your ads and then find new ways forward, because everything that works now will stop working, basically. All ads, regardless of anything changing behind the scenes with Facebook, or whether it's something that Facebook does or whether it's just Facebook does nothing, all ads will die. So there's always like this process of finding new ads. And it could be that maybe at that time too, whatever new technique was needed to make ads work for your genre, for your market, no one had figured it out yet. So no one was teaching it. Because to some degree, when you're teaching stuff, you generally do teach about 6 months behind where things are right now. So because you don't know, what just changed and how to deal with it until you have a bunch of data. So, and then you put together a class or a session or something like that. So that's entirely possible.
Well, I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there any way other than just watching results and guessing to know what algorithmic changes Facebook is making? Like some things I think they've been more open about, like how much text you can put on an ad and things like that. But beyond those kind of very obvious things, can we get anything from Facebook itself? Or are we always just relying on people looking at the results and saying, oh, I'm kind of extrapolating that the change might be this?
There's a few, like Facebook does put out press releases and announcements about changes they're making to the ad platform. Like this year, starting on Wednesday, theoretically, they're making a bunch of changes that won't affect, like if you're sending people to Amazon, to like a retailer like Amazon, they'll have no effect on you Probably. But if you're doing direct sales like Shopify, they can actually have a pretty big effect. And one of them is actually that the FTC has cracked down on people making non-standard claims about a product. So if you're like, take my course and make $10,000 a month, and you have a testimonial and you say like, it doesn't represent standard results or something like that, they're going to come at you and say like, any testimonials, any claims you make have to be standard expected results. And so of course, Facebook's not manually checking these things. They're going to put a bunch of words into an AI bot and say, if you see words like this, flag the ad. And unfortunately, as authors, a lot of times we write copy that the bots misinterpret. I had an author who had their ad account shut down for promoting dangerous businesses because she was running mafia ads for mafia books. And somehow, even after like human review, Facebook was convinced that she was running ads for the mob, which is ridiculous. So you might be like, oh, well, I don't do that particular kind of thing. It's like, yeah, but do you maybe use some wording in an ad? So you want to doesn't pay attention. Like, if I'm going to make an ad, I don't know, about someone who is a teacher, make sure I don't use any wording that might seem like a nonfiction ad about teaching something. Another one is that they flagged health and wellness. And they, of course, this was all put out in press releases by Facebook. So you can actually follow like their ad platform press release feeds, or they actually publish them on their help website for ads too. It was determined through some court cases that if I was to run an ad for heart medication and be selling this, even if it's like not like actual heart medication, it's just like a holistic thing. And I had that on my website and like running Shopify. And when you're running a sales ad, if I would send someone from Facebook to Shopify and they make a purchase, Shopify would send that data back to Facebook. And then Facebook could then try to, optimize and find more people like the person who purchased. We don't get that if we run ads to say Amazon or Apple or something. But if you run sales ads, you get that. And it was determined that's in violation of HIPAA laws, because now you're sharing with a third party, Facebook, that this person has a particular medical condition. So there's all this whole big crackdown on anything that might get flagged as health and wellness. So say you're running a book ad and your main character is somehow in the health and wellness industry. Maybe they're like, I don't know, like they practice Reiki or something like that. Like who knows what it could be, or anything that seems like a therapist. Cause that also, like, do you suffer from depression would be considered health and wellness, and they can't send that sort of information back and forth. So that's something you have to be careful about. So there's a lot of tangential things that can kind of hit us, and almost more as authors, because we write fiction, and we're talking about things that we're like, oh, I'm just writing a book. It wouldn't hit any of these things. Like, well, yes, if a human was doing the review, that'd be true, but they're not. So those are some things to look out for. And again, you can check out they've got a bunch of releases, or you could just these can always be a little bit sensational, but you can just go to YouTube and just search for Facebook ad changes current year. And you'll end up finding all sorts of people who actually are in the ad space outside of authordom who will be talking about these things. Mostly they talk about direct sales ads where you're selling from your own store, but they can be a good bellwether for like getting an idea of what's going on. And that might be better than trying to read through Facebook's technical releases. But it does always involve some amount of sleuthing though, because very few people are doing current, like frequent content talking about what's relevant for authors.
Yeah, it makes me think of a couple of things. One is that I think it's inevitable that giant platforms like Facebook and Amazon are going to have to set rules that are, will take care of some bad players, but sweep up some of the good players in the process. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just something that authors have to accept. The price you pay for accessing enormous platforms is that they're not looking, no human being except maybe upon appeal is going to be looking at these things. And so they have to put in automated things that say, all of this kind of thing we're going to take off the platform, and there's going to be some percentage of those that they didn't intend to impact, but they do because it's automated. And it also makes me think that you were talking a little bit about looking for information on things not necessarily specific to books. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts before we get into the details of Facebook ads about whether you see Facebook ads as just one of a set of ad promotions that people do, combining that with platforms where book browsing is the purpose. So, of course, I'm thinking mainly of Amazon ads and BookBub ads, that if you put ads up on Amazon or BookBub, you're putting it in front of people who are looking for a book, unlike Facebook, where it's much harder to make that connection. Do you have thoughts about that, like Facebook ads within a larger promotional ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that the authors should never be putting all their eggs in one basket when it comes to advertising. Absolutely. I recommend any author I work with that they're running at least both Facebook and AMS ads, or maybe if they can't get Facebook to work, then BookBub, maybe Pinterest, something like that. Because even if you can get things really cooking on one platform, like you experienced, it will make a change and your ads will stop working. And given enough time and energy, you can probably figure it out. Time, energy, and money, probably. You can figure it out. But wouldn't it be nice if you had something else that was also working at that point and that you didn't see all of your sales dry up? So I think it's very smart to do that. And you're absolutely right. Like Amazon in some regards is lower risk because your ads on AMS are only showing to people currently shopping for books. Whereas Facebook, your ads could be showing to someone who's looking at cat videos or whatever. Like you have no idea. They're just doom scrolling through reels. So diversifying your marketing always makes sense. I mean, like no serious company out there is only running ads on one platform. Like every company is always looking for new platforms, new ways of finding, the right people. And actually finding people in niche areas can actually be really good because you could, like say, for example, some new, reading platform comes along and they open up ads and you might be like one of 10 authors. You could like have an opportunity to dominate an ad space or something like that. So I think it definitely makes sense to always be looking at new things. That's one of my big goals for 2025 is to really start examining other players because Facebook has made advertising a lot more complicated in 2024. And with all these new rules coming in 2025, it's not as easy as it used to be. So there's opportunities now with things like, Hulu and Disney and of course YouTube where authors might be able to run ads because they have self-service ad platforms for those now. So I'm going to be looking into that, looking into other things. And BookBub's also a great option too. Although BookBub does tend to attract bargain hunters. So one does have to keep that in mind. You want to make sure you have really strong read through before you dive too much into BookBub, but it certainly doesn't hurt to experiment with it to say, I'm going to spend $150 on a BookBub experiment and see what kind of return I can get from that. I think everybody should be trying out stuff like that.
Yeah. So moving on more specifically to Facebook ads over this period of time where I was trying to rev up my Facebook ads again, I was studying and following approaches that gave advice about how to target ads. And I was also experimenting with the idea of letting Facebook do the targeting. And so, Facebook has more data about user behavior than we're ever going to have. And so just let them make the decision. So at that very general level, authors doing their own targeting or allowing a platform like Facebook to do the targeting. What are your thoughts about that?
It depends a bit on your genre. The thing with Facebook, when you think about like the data that they have and the kind of decision-making they're using for advertising, to take a step back, Facebook is not built for us, right? Facebook is built for Apple and Samsung and Microsoft and Land Rover. It's even built for companies like Lululemon or Ninja coffee makers long before it's made for someone like us. So, and Facebook actually will charge very different costs per clicks based on what kind of product someone's selling. Like in the direct sales land, you're like looking at $2 a click as like a good cost per click for a lot of high-end products. And people are like, if you can get your cost per click under $2, you're going to be off to a really good start. And most authors would be like crying in the bathtub if we were paying $2 a click because there's no way we could be profitable at that CPC. So Facebook knows how much products cost and they do adjust accordingly. I know back in 2006 when I was working in the automotive industry, brands like brands like Toyota would pay $15 for a lead, for like a qualified lead of a person that had like the intent and the wherewithal to actually buy one of their vehicles. So you can imagine what they're paying on Facebook for that. And Facebook has all this economic data on us too. It knows where we live. It knows if we have kids. It knows if we're college educated. It knows if we own cars, rent cars, buy cars. It knows all these things, half of it because we just type it into the box. When we're telling our friends, we're also telling Facebook, as it turns out. So they're using a lot of like when Facebook knows audiences and knows people, the things it gives the most weight to are not like what author do they read. It is getting better at that sort of thing because, it used to be like really sort of like hand-coded algorithms where someone would write in like, okay, if a person shows interest in any one of these categories, we're going to like show them this kind of ad, at a higher price point. And they have to be like, it all have to be done manually. Now with AI, doesn't allow that work. It can be more dynamic. So someone who's interested in buying cars, might be paying lots of money for car clicks, but might also be getting some ads for books. That didn't used to happen. So it used to be when it came to doing really broad targeting, that if you were in a broad audience with a lot of people available, like say thrillers or contemporary romance targeting only women, you could actually kind of do okay because, 50% of women read some kind of romance. And the majority of those women who read romance read contemporary. So you could just broad target women in a particular age group and go from there. But if you were to write something like what I write, like sapphic military science fiction, that sort of targeting would never work because I'm in such a niche that if I was to show my ads to like this broad group of people, Facebook would never find my actual audience. It's better, like I said, it's better now than it used to be because of how they prioritize certain types of matching. But also we have to be better at our creative than we've ever had to be before too, because Facebook uses AI to do all the targeting behind the scenes, and the AI is not actually super reliable. It can completely go off the rails sometimes. So if your ad creative is really generic, like you're just showing a hot guy or a hot woman, you could get all sorts of bad clicks and actually train the AI wrong on how on who your audience is. So it's a tricky answer, but the answer is actually it depends, and it depends on a whole bunch of factors. That's actually one of the things I talk about a lot when people come to me for consulting or anything like that is we like really look at like what you write, who your audience is, and how we're going to attract the right person. And there's no one size fits all, to be honest. Some people we do broad targeting, like thriller authors, you can almost always start off with broad targeting. Although you can usually start with broad targeting and then narrow it down and do even better. So that's often where I go. But it depends if it's a male or female audience. Female audiences, you can usually narrow down with thrillers. Male audiences, you can oftentimes stay broad and do well. So it's a lot of like, here's our stable of things that we can try. Let's try them all and then measure the results and go from there.
Yeah. One of the things that your comments are making me think of is that yesterday I was working on a possible update to the design of the YouTube thumbnail for the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I got all done. I did it in Canva, and I thought I'm not a design professional. So what I'd really like to do is feed this into an AI that would analyze the image against specific use for YouTube. And the same would really be true of Facebook, like analyze this specifically to its effectiveness on Facebook. The example I always use is that for BookBub ads, I'll watch the experts in BookBub ads and the images they come up with. And they're, in my view, they're amateurish looking. But mm-hmm. These are the ads like subtle doesn't work, like very in your face kind of things. And I thought, okay, well, I would never come up with that on my own. Are you aware of any tools like that you could feed in an image for a Facebook ad and say, is this effective? Or I guess by extension, tools that you could feed in text and say, is this effective?
That's a tricky thing because AI is not actually capable of reasoning and like analyzing. So what it finds is, is your thing fit within the average of what is out there? And also if you tell it to like do an analysis, it goes and looks up like what do analysis look like and then does an analysis. It writes, basically AI is always writing fiction. Now that being said, some AIs have been tuned with the ability to do specific things. I've never tried doing those exact things. So there might be an AI that's been tuned a little bit better. But the really tricky thing with something like Facebook ads is knowing whether or not it got the results that you wanted. Like you can find like a Facebook ad that gets lots of likes or lots of comments, but we've all run Facebook ads for books to get tons of likes and comments and no sales. So I'm not entirely sure that you could find an AI that has the back end and the front end data. That might be something we'll have in like 5 years when people maybe, the problem is like no one wants to share their sales data with AIs. But YouTube is different though, because YouTube is all about the views, which is all publicly available data. So yeah, AI could absolutely do an analysis on YouTube and then find the thumbnails that get the most views. And YouTube doesn't make all this data available anymore. They used to do more, but there's also data on like how quickly a video grew. Like, if it's, did it get tons of views in the first day, or was this because the view's been up for 10 years that it got all these views? So I could probably make that kind of analysis too. And that could actually be pretty interesting. And I think to some extent, just looking at the top, you could probably do it too. Look at the top videos and look at what they're doing. But it might take some time to sort of take a step back and be like, what elements in here do I think are the elements that are causing them to have success? And you probably have to like go and like screenshot a whole bunch of thumbnails that are relevant to you, that are doing well, and then start looking like what are the common elements in here. That could be quite the adventure. And AI, if there's an AI that could do it, could probably do it quite a bit faster.
Well, I have to admit, I'm probably just looking for justification. I'm looking for it to pat me on the back for what I've come up with, because I kind of know what I should be doing. I can look at my 3 favorite YouTube channels in the author space, which are Michael Around's Author Level Up, DLL Roberts' Self-Publishing with Dale, and MK Williams' channel. And their thumbnails are all really consistent. And I'm like, I don't really want to take that many pictures of myself in order to make thumbnails. But yeah, I guess I'm just justifying it by saying, well, there's a benefit to like standing out from the crowd. But at some point, I'll just take a bunch of pictures of myself and do that.
Yeah. One of the things I think it was on the Book Funnel podcast a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how you need to identify, we were talking about book covers at this point, but you need to identify the things that are sending the right signals, but then also differentiate. So like if you're looking at these thumbnails, what is it? Is it the font they're using? Is it the placement? Is it the verbiage? Is it the catchy phrase they're using? Which of these things do I think is actually grabbing the most? And then how can I make mine like that, but stand out? And the thing that happened with me is I was writing a spin-off series about a woman who had changed her skin to purple as part of a marketing campaign to go undercover and decided she liked it and just kept her skin purple. So she's a sci-fi, basically an FBI agent quite a ways away in the future. And she has purple skin and she's kind of like badass. But I wanted to make the covers different. So I want the covers to have like a very white background. So she's on these very clean, pristine space stations and spaceships. And then the cover designer decided to do the font in pink. So I'm writing like military science fiction, investigatory, adventure science fiction kind of stuff with a white book cover with a purple woman with pink text on it. And my primary readership is men. And I was kind of terrified. I'm like, this is either going to be amazing or this is going to turn everybody off terribly. And they are, to date, the most profitable words I've ever written. Because they were novellas too. And I released them really quickly and they really took off really strongly and they were really easy to write and didn't take that much time. And it was really cool when you would see it in the charts on Amazon. It'd be like all these greedy looking sci-fi books and then these white, pink, and purple books that still screamed sci-fi and all the things I wanted, but they stood out. And I'm always thinking about that. Like, how can I look the same but stand out, which is kind of paradoxical, but it is something that can be accomplished.
Yeah. Oh, I love that story. So I wanted to get into like a little bit more tactical questions about Facebook ads. So you had sent some suggestions for good topics to cover. And I'm thinking for each of these, if you could just give a couple of the best practices and then maybe a couple of the pitfalls that people should avoid, things you've seen that you would advise people against. And so the first one would be how to make good ad creative. What are your best practices and pitfalls to avoid for how to make the best ad creative?
So good ad creative, the first thing you always need to do is have high contrast. Make sure that you take any images you find, whatever the subject of the images stands out. And a great way to see that is to flip it to black and white. If you can flip it to black and white and still everything is still very legible and clear, great. If something's become muddy and hard to make out, then you have an image that's not going to grab people's attention. And likewise, actually doing this flip to black and white is also a good way to make sure that your image is visible to people who are colorblind as well. So I do that when I'm like selecting images a lot of the time. And after I've put any text or anything on it, I want to make sure it's very readable to everybody. Because as people are scrolling through Facebook, if it's not high contrast, it's not going to catch their attention. And then the other thing, of course, is that it needs to have text on it now. That used to be the kiss of death. And now it pretty much needs to have text on it. Because people have sort of been trained by TikTok and Reels and whatnot to see something on the screen and immediately have text that's giving them context for it. And then the last thing is that Facebook now, this sort of a pitfall and the way around it is that Facebook, because of how it does targeting now, will eventually ignore whenever you told it to target and start showing the ad to whoever the heck it wants to. So your ad creative needs to say book as much as possible in the text that you put in above and below the image. And then also, the ad image itself. And one of the things you should do is put a book cover in, like the 3D little book images in the corner, because that's what's going to give people like a visual cue that this is a book. Because if not, it just might look like a cool TV show or a video game or something like that. And they'll click on it and you'll train Facebook wrong by that. So ad creative has actually become far more complicated than targeting now, I would say, with Facebook.
Yeah, that leads me to another sort of AI-related question, and that is the advantage creative or whatever those options are called in Facebook that sometimes evidently, like once you turn it on, it's on forever and you're always going to get the suggestions. So in the infrequent times when I'm running boosts, I'm going to ask you about that later, but it'll say, do you want to, here are 3 alternatives, and they always sound horrible to me. And I realize that, the tone of, let's say I'm putting up a promotion for this podcast episode and I'll have, Malorie Cooper joins me to talk about blah, blah, blah. And then the suggestions are always like, want to know how to win at Facebook ads in capital letters and things like that. And do you ever find that it's beneficial to accept any of those suggestions that Facebook makes?
I've actually found that it makes some pretty good ones sometimes. And I don't always look at them because I have a bit of human hubris going on, I think, where I'm like, I'm smart. I don't need the computer to help me with this. But sometimes I look at them, and sometimes when I look at them, I'm like, no, that doesn't fit me, right? Like, I'm not going to write something in all caps ever. It's just not the way I want to market, the way I want to present, just as an example. But other times I'll be like, that's actually really good. And it says what I said in a much more interesting way. But one of the tricky things too is that clickbaity headlines do work really well. So it's always like, how much can I get some amount of clickbait in there without coming off as crass, which is always like, I think it's always a balancing act.
Well, that balancing act is something I've never really thought about it this way before, but, we're always advising indie authors that they have to wear different hats. They have to have their, their creative hat, their editor hat, and their marketing hat, and their promotion hat, and their CEO hat, and all those things. And at the same time, we're advising people about brand and being consistent with their brand. So I see some of those, and I think I shoot myself in the foot, I think, every time with these kinds of things, because I always go to what I think is like brand right, more understated and not in your face and not clickbaity. And so I think that I'm unnecessarily limiting myself by favoring sort of a very inflexible adherence to what I see as my brand, rather than exploring the opportunities that if I were really wearing my promoter hat, I might be promoting. Do you have thoughts about that?
No, you make a really good point, actually, that we sometimes keep too much of the artist hat on when we're doing the marketing.
Yeah.
And we don't allow the marketer to be as free as they would be otherwise. So no, I think that definitely is worth considering. And as you're saying, like, I'm being introspective about myself, even like, am I hampering myself this way? I think one of the things I did actually that benefited me really well with helping authors with Facebook ads is when I did my book, the title was "Help My Facebook Ads Suck," which is kind of like a little bit, not like clickbaity, because I don't think there was any bait there. There was no bait and switch, but it was like attention grabbing and perhaps a bit hyperbolic. Although probably a lot of authors would say like, nope, no hyperbole detected.
Yeah.
But it worked really well. And if I just had made a title that was like, make your Facebook ads work better, that would be nowhere near as interesting. So no, you're absolutely right. I think that we do need to maybe take the author hat off and put it in a different room entirely while we're doing our marketing, because it can be too easy to let that, like you said, like, I want to be understated and demure and respectable looking and et cetera. Well, maybe you do need to have the all caps, make your Facebook ads not suck with Malorie Cooper or something like that. That's entirely possible. Yeah.
Well, that's going to be my goal for 2025, is to accept some of these suggestions and just let them go and see what happens.
Yeah, I have to. And I've been like pleasantly surprised by some of them.
So let's move on to targeting. You mentioned targeting. And again, are there a couple of best practices and a couple of pitfalls people should watch out for as far as ad targeting goes?
Well, one of the things that happened in January of 2024 is that Facebook made it so there's this thing called Advantage Plus detailed targeting. And that's when you put in a bunch of interests like authors or genre or something like that. And Facebook will then, it used to be a checkbox. And if you checked it, Facebook would say, we're going to go beyond these interests if we think it will help you with results. And in January of 2024, that checkbox went away and it was just on by default. And that's one of the things that basically has made it so that now Facebook will eventually show your ads to whoever the heck it wants. And that's just that's actually made us have to be a lot better at creative. But the other thing that they changed around the same time is they made this new thing called Advantage Audiences the default. So when you go to create an ad, Advantage Audience is on by default. And what you're going to see is that your audience section is broken up into two boxes. In the top box, you pick country, a minimum age, and a couple other settings that most people rarely touch. In the bottom box, you pick a full age range, gender, and then your interests. And basically, the long story short, it ignores everything in the bottom box. And so a lot of people have spent a lot of money this year running ads thinking that they selected female for their romance series, only to find out that Facebook was showing their ad 90% to men and whatnot. So targeting, you always want to, there's a blue link that says switch to original audience. You always want to switch back to the original audience system. And that's the one where all of your audience selections are like in one box on the page, because without that, it won't listen to your age range and it won't listen to the gender you selected at all. So it's very important that you do that. And I'm still actually a believer in choosing and actually going in and manually picking my interests, because I find that I can do better than Facebook like 95% of the time. If I have an ad or an author or an account where we just can't get it to work, I will try like going wide with my targeting and seeing if that will work. But like I said, 95% of the time I can pick better interests than Facebook can still, and give the ad a better shot.
That's one of the reasons that I actually enjoy, although I'm not very good at it, but I do enjoy playing around with BookBub ads because the user interface is so easy. Like, it's all right there. You only have to make a couple of selections.
Yeah,
I'm sure that for more sophisticated advertisers, that's frustrating because it is very basic. But I've even spoken to, like, for a while, I was working with a service. I would have a monthly meeting with a Facebook ads expert. We would go through my ads, and then for the following month, I would act on what our agreement would be, and then we would meet again the next month. Mm-hmm. And we even ran into a couple of situations where I would show her something. She was like, I have no idea why it's doing that. And then she would go off and talk with her like team of Facebook ad experts. And, days later, she would come back and say, we finally figured out how that, why that's doing that, because 3 layers down, just as you're saying, there's some checkbox that you never knew was on.
And Facebook's constantly testing things on subsets of the accounts too. So I have access to about 150 Facebook accounts. And I would say that at most 15% of them look like any other one. I was doing a video at one point on some changes Facebook was making, and I had to use 10 different ad accounts to show all the different ways that this change could manifest, and whatnot. So it can be frustrating sometimes when you're on a call with someone and trying to walk through something. You're like, I have no idea why you're seeing that.
Yeah.
We're going to have to dig into it a bit. But, that being said, I think it's actually always been solvable. It just takes a bit of time to sort through it.
Well, one of the things I did is I just, in looking across my social media usage in general, I just decided I wanted to do less of it. I was going to focus what I did do on Facebook, and I was going to think of it as a community building platform, not a sales platform. Mm-hmm. And so I just stopped doing ads. But since my goal was just getting in front of my post in front of people, and they were always like pictures of my dog, or, oh, here's a nice recent reader quote or something like that, I would just boost it for $1. And I thought, this is, I'm not spending much money, and I am seeing like an increase both in the numbers, but also just like in my experience on Facebook. If people are looking just for more engagement and that community building aspect, do you think that there's any benefit to boosting posts?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things when I talk to people about boosted posts, I just say, be aware that boosted posts are awareness ads. They're not traffic ads. Facebook doesn't target and refine them in order to get more clicks. They target and refine them in order to get more engagement. So if that's your goal, boosted posts can actually work really well. Absolutely.
So another category we wanted to talk about was how to analyze ads. So best practices and pitfalls there.
So one of the pitfalls that exists, I'll start with those because sometimes I forget to cover them, is if you're running traffic ads to a retailer like Amazon, a lot of the advice that Facebook is going to give you is wrong or not applicable. Because a traffic ad, all ads are, of course, inside of campaigns, and every campaign has an objective. And the objective for traffic ads is the click. That's what they consider to be success for traffic ad. They drove traffic to wherever you want to drive traffic to. So when it says an ad is high performing, or Facebook is making recommendations for the ad, they're saying if you do the things we're saying, you're going to get more clicks. But Facebook has zero visibility into conversion. So do be aware of that a lot of the recommendations Facebook's making could be detrimental as much as they could be beneficial, because the system is just looking to get you more clicks. It doesn't know about the quality of the clicks. It doesn't know if you're getting any reads or sales off those clicks. It's just trying to get you more clicks. So that's one of the things that you really do need to keep in mind. And what it sort of turns into is like 99% of the time, any Facebook recommendations that it makes are not applicable. The real way that we have to track our ad performance is by using Amazon attribution links, which live inside the reporting section of AMS. And with attribution links, you can make custom links for every ad. You can make them for your newsletter, for your backup book, whatever you want. And those links will then track sales and reads that you get from an ad. They do miss from 30 to 60% of what comes from those ads. So they're not, you might look at your attribution and be like, well, I spent $200 on ads and attribution says I only made like $125. I'm losing money. Probably not, because it probably is missing at least half of what you have going on. But what links are especially good for is comparing multiple ads against each other. So you could make several different ads using different types of targeting, different types of images, maybe some are video, and then you use attribution links to say which one is giving me more reads per click, which one is taking fewer clicks to get a sale. And that's how you have to really measure your ads. And then of course you also want to say this one might be getting twice as many reads, but it's 3 times as expensive. So you have to, of course, make that kind of analysis too. So it does involve doing a bit of math, and not flying entirely by your gut. But the base metric I look for ads there for books in KU is, are you getting at least 10 pages read per click? And that's sort of like an ad that's probably moving into profitability, of course, depending on series length and read through and whatnot. And then for ads that are not in KU, are you getting at least 1 sale for every 50 clicks? It's a good sort of initial metric to try to hit. And then 1 sale every 30 clicks is when you're probably moving into profitability.
And do you find that ads work better for KU than non-KU books?
It's hard to say because there's so many more ads that I run for KU. I've an author I'm working with right now that writes sapphic medical romance that's not in KU. And I would have said there's no way this will sell. And it's actually selling really well. So there's always stuff out there that like upsets my expectations. I'll be like, oh, it's going to work like this. And then I'm like surprised. And sometimes it's pleasant and sometimes it's not pleasant. I do think that in general, there aren't more KU readers than non-KU readers, but they're voracious. So chances are if you can run KU ads and find those whale readers, they will devour your books. Whereas you might find just as many readers for non-KU, but they're only reading a book a month, or one every 2 weeks or even one a week, whereas the KU readers are reading like one a day in some cases. So even from a volume of readers perspective, you're not going to have a big difference. But from a volume of reads perspective, you might get a lot more than KU. And that might make it seem like the Facebook ads are working a lot better for KU when maybe, for example, if your goal is to eventually move to Shopify sales and something like that, then maybe it's not actually going to be any better.
Well, it would be interesting to see a demographic analysis of overlap between these. Like, I would just guess that there's a high demographic overlap between KU users and Facebook, but like not a high demographic overlap between KU users and TikTok.
Yeah, you'd absolutely be right. And the same is true for Facebook versus Instagram. There's a lot of younger readers on Instagram as well. And the younger generation seems to want to buy books more than read them in KU. So, and then likewise, also, if you want to target those younger people, you have to do it with video and not still images. And then in contrast, older readers respond better to images and not video ads. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting demographic angles there.
And I would also think that younger demographic probably feels more comfortable buying direct from author website, and an older demographic probably feels more comfortable purchasing from a known retail platform.
Yep, I think that's also very true. I think part of it, I think, is younger people, they just sort of grown up in a world where, you just put your credit card information in anywhere on the internet and go from there. And the older generation, we're still like, I don't know about this whole internet situation.
Yeah. So I know this is a completely different kind of link, but your mention of links made me think about this, that I used to try to avoid putting links in the text of a post. I would put it in the first comment or something like that. But I stopped doing that altogether because it used to be that making it as frictionless as possible was the goal. And so putting the link right there was desirable. But I think that it's becoming more that making it look conversational and not salesy, and the link kind of makes it look salesy, is desirable. And so how long is it going to take someone to go to their favorite retail platform and type in the name of your book and find it themselves? Do you have a sense of the pros and cons of just letting people find it themselves if you've given them all the information, like the book title, and this is what the book cover looks like?
I think that actually probably works fairly well. I think it depends a bit on the age of your audience. Older people, we're just going to forget shit. It's really kind of what it comes down to. So, I think they might need the link to get them to act on it right away. But also, I know a lot of people that throughout the day, they take screenshots of all the things they're actually interested in buying. And then at the end of the day, they go through and they buy them. And they even do that for ads. They'll screenshot an ad, and then they'll go and buy by just going manually to the place they're going. So I think it does happen to some extent. But the one thing that does seem to happen is that Facebook doesn't like certain platforms. Like I found in this, I haven't tested this in recent months. I don't know if this has changed at all, but Facebook really doesn't like showing content from YouTube. They really want to show video content on their own platform. And for a while, if you put a YouTube link right in a post on Facebook, no one would ever see that post. Like I would just look at my metrics and it never got any visibility at all. Versus if I put it in the first comment, it would do quite a bit better. And then conversely, if I just put the video on Facebook itself, it would do fantastic. Sometimes it was like, okay, I'm going to take the hit because I want to build the platform on YouTube versus I just really want people to see this video. So this one's going to go up everywhere. So sometimes I would make like video by video decisions on that sort of thing. But it is always changing. And there's probably like topic-based nuance to it where like maybe some particular category does better with offsite links and another one doesn't. So like everything with social media now, it's just test and see what happens, you know?
And so the last question we wanted to talk about is what sort of success you can see with ads? What's a realistic expectation that people should go into the ad process with?
I think it's not as rosy as it used to be. Like back in the heyday, back in 2015, 2016, you could see like a 4 to 5 times return on your ads. And in 2023, it was still 2 to 3 times. But when they changed over all the AI targeting, it dropped to like 1.5x on average return on investment for ads. It has gotten better over 2024 as Facebook's AI targeting systems have improved. And I would say that, once you have ads that are working well, doubling your money is entirely possible. Now that of course assumes you've got a good book with good read through and a series of, 3 to 5 books at least that you can make the money as people work through your books. If you've got one book or 2 books or something like that, and your read through is terrible, you're not going to see that return. So there's always a lot of other factors. But doubling your money is still actually really good. There's very few investments out there where you can reliably double your money. I mean, the stock market is only 10% increase a year. So even when Facebook ads were bad, you could oftentimes outperform the stock market with a book. All of the previous, requirements, it's a good book, notwithstanding. But I have authors I work with even now where we can still hit like sometimes 3, sometimes even 4x on their ad spend. So it is entirely possible to actually really ramp it up quite a bit. It gets tricky the more you spend because then you're not, gambling with $10 a day is a whole lot different than gambling with like $500 a day. And so a lot of us do with people's risk aversion and whatnot. But I am out there to say that it is entirely possible to make good money off Facebook ads still for books.
And what would you recommend if someone is intrigued by this and they want to get into Facebook ads and they haven't done any before, so they're just launching into the testing phase? What is an investment they should set aside in order to do that? Like what's the daily amount of money they should plan to spend?
You need to spend $10 a day. $5. The days of $5 a day ads are kind of gone because it takes Facebook too long to figure out who to show your ad to because it starts with a wider group of people than it used to. So you need to commit to $10 a day for a month. So about $300. And you need to sort of assume that if you're first starting out, it's going to take you a couple of months to figure out how to be profitable. And that's if you're diligent. So you probably need to set aside $500 to $1,000 to go through a learning phase before you really can start moving into profitability. And if you're not prepared to do that, then I would really recommend, doing more tried and true advertising or like methods like using paid book promos like, free Booksy, bargain Booksy, ENT, those sorts of things. They're not as good as they used to be, but at least your ads showing to book buyers of a certain category, playing with maybe BookBub ads, and of course running AMS ads as well. Facebook ads are not quite as much for the faint of heart as they used to be, but they're also the one place where you can scale the most and see the biggest return.
Great. Well, Mal, thank you so much. Thank you for giving the pros and cons and also entertaining my various other questions about Facebook ads. Please let everyone know where they can go to find out more about you and everything you do online.
Sure, yeah. So I'm, of course, Malorie Cooper. I write military science fiction under the name MD Cooper, if that's your jam. And if you want to learn more about what my wife and I do, our company is called The Writing Wives, and you can find us at thewritingwives.com. We have a number of different courses that we offer that can help people who, if they're just starting out or if you're like at a higher level looking to level up, and a whole community around all of that too. So we've really made helping authors our entire lives, basically.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a great one.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Malorie. Do you or have you run Facebook ads? And if yes, what advice that Mal shared has made you rethink your approach? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just leave a comment on YouTube. And if you got value from this episode and were thinking, I wish I could buy Matty a cup of coffee, you can do that. Scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click Buy Me a Coffee. Until next time, here's wishing you favorable winds and smooth sailing on your creative voyage.